The easy slate continues for the Minnesota Vikings following their victory against the Indianapolis Colts at US Bank Stadium, because this weekend the 6-2 Minnesota Vikings have their matchup against the 2-7 Jacksonville Jaguars. And even though the Jaguars are 2-7, the Minnesota Vikings still have to travel on the road. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have been playing better football recently. So the fact that the Minnesota Vikings get a big break or a lucky break, whatever you want to call it, ahead of this matchup is a big deal. This take is presented by Hochland Farm. You need to contact Hochland Farm Beef to get the best rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed beef. My wife and I did this, and we got beef for $4.15 a pound. Ground beef, chuck roast, sirloin steaks. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And we got it for $4.15 a pound. You can't get that at a grocery store anywhere. So contact Hochland Farm Beef at 952-491-1541. 952-491-1541 and get 20% off your first order by mentioning the Minnesota Tim podcast. Do that right now. It's best for you financially, physically, mentally, all the above. All right. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be without their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. And I mentioned it earlier that Jaguars are 2-7, but you look at what they've been able to do recently, and just because the Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-7 didn't necessarily mean that the Vikings were a lock to win this football game. You look at what the Jaguars have done this season. Okay, they lost to the Dolphins in the first game of the season. It's not a terrible loss with Tua Tagovailoa. He wasn't hurt yet. Lost to the Cleveland Browns. That's a bad loss. Got pummeled by the Buffalo Bills. Lost to the Houston Texans by 4. Beat the Colts barely. Lost to the Chicago Bears by 19. That's a terrible loss. Beat New England, pummeled them. And then these last 2 weeks, the Jacksonville Jaguars have been surprisingly competitive against the Green Bay Packers, who are 6-3, and against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are also very good this season. They lost by 1 score versus both of those teams. So just because they're 2-7 and just because the Minnesota Vikings are 6-2, it didn't necessarily mean that the Vikings were just going to run into Jacksonville and steamroll this football team, because they have proven that they are at least mostly competitive in almost every single game this season. Every single game besides 2. So 5 of their 7 losses have happened by 1 score. 3-point loss to the Dolphins, 5-point loss to the Browns, 4-point loss to the Texans, 3-point loss to the Green Bay Packers, and a 5-point loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. So if this is even possible, in the Jacksonville Jaguars season, they're playing their best football right now. A win versus New England, a loss to Green Bay by 3, and a loss to the Philadelphia Eagles by 5. And not having Trevor Lawrence is really going to help the Minnesota Vikings, because that means Mack Jones, who was selected in the first round by the New England Patriots, is going to have to step in and fill in for Trevor Lawrence. And even though this might sound ridiculous, I still don't know if the Minnesota Vikings are a lock to win on Sunday, even with Mack Jones starting. Let's take a look at Trevor Lawrence's statistics on Pro Football Reference, just so that we have an idea on why it's a big deal that the Jacksonville Jaguars don't have their starting quarterback. All right, well, he's 2-7, 61% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 6 picks. I don't know about you guys, but it seems like Trevor Lawrence has underperformed in his career based on the expectations that everybody had of him coming out of Clemson. Because he was supposed to be this superstar quarterback. He's going to be amazing. He's going to be sensational. And he's made it to the playoffs, and he's had a little bit of success. But 21 touchdowns, 14 picks in 2023, 2022, 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. His rookie season, 12 touchdowns, 17 picks. Let's just say that Trevor Lawrence has left a lot to be desired by the Jacksonville Jaguars organization and fans, and probably the NFL and as a whole. His quarterback rating this season has been 87.9, and his QBR has been 60.8. So even though his numbers aren't spectacular, I would rather face against Mack Jones than face against Trevor Lawrence. So it's a big deal for the Minnesota Vikings. And the Minnesota Vikings, they have gotten back on track against the Indianapolis Colts. And it should stay that way this weekend against the Jacksonville Jaguars, because let's just take a look at Mack Jones' stats. Last year, for the Patriots, he had 10 touchdowns and 12 picks in 11 games. In 2022, he had 14 touchdowns, 11 picks in 14 games. And in 2021, he had 22 touchdowns, 13 picks his rookie season in 17 games. So you look at Mack Jones' statistics, and he has gradually gotten worse over his NFL career. His rookie season was his best season, and his rookie season was the season where everyone was looking at him as a possible franchise quarterback replacement for Tom Brady. And then everything went downhill from there. A 10-7 record his rookie season, a 6-8 record his second season, and his third season with the Patriots, he was 2-9. And this year, it looks like he's only played in 2 games, and he's hardly had any stats. 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, 6 for 9. Wouldn't it be the most Minnesota Vikings thing ever if Mack Jones and the 2-7 Jacksonville Jaguars defeated the Vikings that are 6-2 and looking to do damage in the NFC? You cannot overlook anybody in the NFL, especially if you're the Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Vikings fans, because you've seen things like this happen. And it's not just against the Minnesota Vikings. You see things like this happen throughout the NFL. So I don't want to create the Minnesota Vikings to, be this victim of like, oh, this crappy team beat the Vikings again. Stuff like this happens. Crazy things happen. Last year, the Las Vegas Raiders defeated the Kansas City Chiefs. What? Last year, the New York Giants, when the Packers were rolling, defeated the Green Bay Packers with Tommy DeVito. So we shouldn't overlook the Jacksonville Jaguars, because crazy things happen in the NFL almost every single week. Or at least there's things in the NFL season that you can point to and be like, how did that happen? The Chiefs are back-to-back Super Bowl champions, and they lost to the Las Vegas Raiders? Are you serious? Jordan Love had the biggest hot streak at the end of the year last year, and they lost to Tommy DeVito, the Italian stallion, and the New York Giants, who suck? So just because the Vikings are going against the crappy Jacksonville Jaguars and Mack Jones, they can't overlook them, because they've been competitive in recent weeks and are playing their best football of the season, if that's a thing for a 2-7 football team. So should the Minnesota Vikings win? Absolutely. Will they win? Probably. Is it a guarantee that they win? I don't think so. It's a road game. They're coming off a Sunday Night Football performance where they pummeled the Colts in the second half, not the first half. So this would be a good game for the Vikings to get back on the right track offensively, because offensively, they have not really been clicking on all cylinders recently. 20 points against the Rams, 21 points against the Colts, all happened in the second half. Lions, they scored 29 points, but 14 of them were gifts from the Lions, a fumble, return, touchdown, the fake punt that led to an Aaron Jones touchdown. So the Minnesota Vikings offense needs to get back on the right track. And this is a great weekend to do it. But, like I said, I don't think the Vikings are a lock to win at all against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not because the Vikings are victims or because of the Vikings organization, but just because you see things like this happen in the NFL. But it'll be fun to watch this weekend.